of India. So, let me just kind of get started with the basic housekeeping stuff and then get into the details as soon as possible. So the first thing is just to give you a sense of how long we're going to take. So just a little bit of introductions. We are also waiting for people to come in. So usually, the first 10 minutes or so, we will go through some important resources that would be required for you when you are writing your ISB essays. Then we will spend some time analyzing the essays that we have for this year, both the essays, post which we will be talking about some tips to write effective essays, followed up with a Q&A session, right? So let me just get a couple of ground rules. So the first ground rule, all of you have used the chat window, correct? So last we have Nikhil from Chicago, so great. Now there are a couple of other things that we can, kind of add over here, which is, so all of you are able to see my screen, right? So I'm going to give you a poll. So just 650, 62 to 700, 710 to 740, 50 or 760 plus. Okay, so I just had a poll. I just created a poll for you. So let's just go ahead and take the poll. All right. So you're able to see a poll over here, right? So just go ahead and you can let us know what has been your GMAT scores. So I'm assuming that all of you have taken the GMAT, but very clearly many of you have not, right? That's okay. I assume you're planning to take it by December 15th. So if you like Mission Impossible, you like the adrenaline rush, right? You probably want to take it on December 14th and then write your essays in one shot on December 14th night, apply on December 15th, and guess what? You make it, right? So I would love for such a heroic moment to happen, right? But I'm assuming otherwise you are pretty much looking at taking the, you've already taken the GMAT, you already have had a look at the questions, and you have some sense of possibly what you're going to be writing, but maybe you have some queries, maybe there is a little part about the whole essay writing process that is a little hazy in your head. You've come to the right place. Just stay with us till the end of it. If you're applying to ISB this year in round 2, I can assure you this is probably the most important couple of hours that you're going to spend this week, right? Apart from obviously the actual part of writing your essays, correct? So great. I just see that you have a bulk of people, 15 people in the 660 to 700 range. We have 15 in the 710 to 750 range, and we have a few in the 600 to 650 range, and 4 people with sub 600. Great. So now that you've seen the poll, you've seen the chat window. There is also another window, which is the Q&A window that you see on the top. So in case you have any questions, you have any queries, please don't put it on the chat window. Kindly put it on the Q&A window so that in the end, when we go through the questions, I can sort and I can, go through it as we answer questions, right? There are certain other features like raising your hand. I wouldn't know what to do if you were to raise your hand. So if there is any question specific to your profile about the ISB essays, put it in Q&A. If there is anything technical that you would like to discuss, say, I'm not able to hear, right? Or I'm getting booted out, kindly put it in the chat window. Just one thing over here, which is if one person is able to hear what we are saying, I'm going to assume that the problem is at your end, not at our end. So if someone is not able to hear, just put it on chat window, hey, are others able to hear? And I would request the others to help us. And if you do hear us clearly, just go ahead and type saying, hey, I'm able to hear you clearly, so that we don't worry about it. So typically the problem gets sorted if you kind of just log off and log on again, right? Cool. So with that out of the way, let's look at the first set of things. So introductions from our end. So my name is Arun, and I'm going to be the host, but the person who's going to be talking us through it is Al-Amin Sharfuddin. So he's known by Amin. So in fact, it's the first time that I'm actually taking notice of his last name, right? So Amin has been with Crackverbal as a part-time faculty and is a good friend of mine. So I think we shared the same notion as to, is it even possible for us to evaluate, human psyche, right? Is it possible for me to take the potential of a person and distill it in 700 words, right? So we have kind of had discussions. So we were going through the ISB questions. We have some thoughts on that. I'm going to let Amin speak a little bit more about himself. So Amin, please go ahead and...
Sure, thanks, Arun. Thank you for introducing me. So hello to everyone. My name is Al-Amin Sharfuddin. I come from ISB batch of 2011, the days where WhatsApp wasn't popular, the days where Facebook wasn't popular. And we've come a long way in the aspect of how digital is taken over, right? And that's kind of what I've made my career out of as well. Post ISB, I have literally gotten into the digital scheme of things. I've headed an ad network. I've handled retargeting. I've gotten into the analytics space right now, where we help brands measure what is the effectiveness of spends on their digital, right? And everywhere around, you see the number of jobs that has opened up in the digital space. Everyone's craving to understand what's happening in the digital marketing space. So for me, that's been the story, at least post ISB, as to how I could pivot into the digital marketing space and made a career out of it. Crackverbal is close to my heart. I've come across such amazing profiles and such amazing people who are prospects and as well as have gone on to convert at premium institutions, including ISB. And ISB is even more closer to my heart. I still go there every year trying to catch up with students, even on campus, to see what kind of challenges and roadblocks they're going through. And this is a way at least to be relevant of challenges as the world progresses. So first of all, the fact that you guys have made time to come and be part of this webinar itself is a big step. And so just stay in there, hang in there. We have a lot of interesting stuff to talk about, and hopefully you take all the value out of it and make sure you put that back into your application and in your journey towards ISB.
Thanks a lot, Amin. I think, as usually in such times, it's like I'm usually excited to get through to the actual meat of it. But I think there are certain things that we just wanted to kind of get through in terms of making sure that they are equipped with all the right things. So whatever we want to say in the essays, so obviously I've, about Crackverbal. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about Crackverbal over here. But just wanted to pick on one point, which is what we do in the admission services, consulting space. So what Crackverbal does is we believe that there is a pool of very talented people who have done their MBA. And to be very honest, it is not just the fact that they have done an MBA, but I think the bigger deal is also the fact that they are they have the perspicacity to look at other people's applications and actually give comment on it. And because trust me on that, these are two different skills, right? Getting into a B school is one skill, but knowing what it takes to get into a B school is a completely different skill. And, all the mentors, I consider as friends, but we cannot work very closely. And to a large extent, I think that's where our mentors make a difference, that they're doing it because they genuinely believe that they would like to help applicants. They don't do it, very honestly, none of them do it for the money part, right? I think money is just a side thing for them, but they genuinely believe in helping students put in their best foot forward for the application. And the way the application works is also we kind of work very closely. We don't write the essays. We believe that it's the student or the applicant who should be writing it. Think of it as a sounding board, right? Is this story good, or do you think I should be talking about this? Do you think the school would want to hear that? And we kind of take you through the process. We kind of help you, handhold you, and that's really the role that we play over here. Would we go ahead and edit and make some, also check the grammar in the English part? Sure, right? But to be honest, I think to boil down everything to English is unfair, because trust me, of all the things that we do in the application consulting process, that's probably the 10-20% bit, right? A lot of heavy lifting is just understanding the stories, just trying to see if it makes sense. And as I said, just acting as a sounding board for the applicants, because I understand that you are applying for the first time. In many cases, you're writing for the first time, right? So we just kind of help to have a pair of eyes, look over it and give our expert suggestions on what we think you've written. All right, so a couple of free resources to get you started. I think most of you have been to the YouTube channel, so we got a bunch of videos there. I think probably every top school, top 25, top 30 schools, we have covered it in terms of the analysis of the essays, correct? So it's a treasure trove, because each of these videos are like 10 to 20 minutes long, right? Where I have given a very detailed analysis, like why that school, what are the essays, how to kind of analyze it. If you have gone through the ISB blog, you probably realize the level of content that we have actually covered, right? So we have kind of gone in a lot of depth. Plus, you also have a bunch of ebooks. So many of the questions, many of the things that you may have, like how to pick a right B school or how to differentiate yourself from the applicant pool, all of these we have covered in terms of ebooks. So you might also want to refer those in case you have already not done so. And in case you have not already reached out, we also have a MBA profile report. It's a PDF that gives you a basic idea of, your profile, where we think it would stand. But I think the key here is not just to look at the report, but also schedule a call with one of our in-house experts who can probably answer your queries, your top 3 queries, right? If you were to put it, we will get that answer. Right? Okay, so without much ado, let me just get started into the meat of it, which is how ISB evaluates candidates. So what I'm picking right now, and I'm going to have, so think of this webinar as a conversation that Amin and I are having. So this is how we would normally talk about things as well. So I actually picked up, Amin, from the ISB website. So this is what the ISB website says, that there are 3 things that they look for. One is the academic credentials, and I'm copy pasting the exact line from the ISB website. And then there is leadership potential, and then there is a third thing, which is personal attribute. So what's your thoughts on these points, and why do you think ISB is looking for these?
That's the call coming in for ISB. That's the deal. So here's the deal, man. Obviously, the first piece they want to know: have you demonstrated any kind of academic resilience in the past? Because ISB, the term is made up. I mean, the whole course is made up of 8 terms. Each term is about a month and a half, and you're doing anywhere between 3 to 5 subjects. And these are hardcore concepts, case studies, assignments, which means it takes a lot of grit and a lot of effort to go through it and also ensure that you're getting value out of these classes, right? Now, what good are these classes if you aren't equipped enough to be able to digest the content and also put in hard work and demonstrated that I have done my academics, in a good way in the past. So the first part, the academic credentials, is more like a check mark saying that, okay, have you done well? Have you been able to stay competitive? Have you showcased that you've come ahead? They're not going to come and say, oh, this specific subject, did you do well? No, right? They just want to understand where you stand vis-a-vis the same set of people that are across the country, and how have you fared in those times. And of course, I've seen a lot of cases where either there is a dip in percentages in either the 12th or during graduation or during a particular year in engineering, and their students feel the need that I should maybe explain why I went down, um, and I should possibly explain why possibly I'm a better candidate as against what the grades tell me. And sometimes they call it on the board, like for example metric CBSE, that okay, certain boards give me lesser percentages, so will that be sufficient? So you can't go change, right? You can't go change what you've done already. But the idea is, the way ISB looks at this is, it's a check mark. Have you stayed there? Have you stayed competitive? And have you been able to digest the streams that you've gone through in a good way? And if you come from a good institution, because all these are like good check marks that say that, all right, person has come from here, has scored a good amount, which means this person can handle the pressure of academics back in ISB. And I think that's my comment on the academic part. You have something to add, Arun, on that?
I just had a question. In your class, like one thing that people worry is, what if I have something that I did when I was, when I was 20, I was stupid. I ended up getting backlogs, or I ended up repeating a few papers. So, like a lot of people are worried, right? Like, I mean, am I going to be held responsible for something that I did when I was 20, right? What is your advice? Do you have any, did you have any batchmates who probably had poor academic record?
Yeah, absolutely. And see, most students basically go through this classic mistake that, hey, I did bad at some point in time, and now I need to explain as to why I did bad, right? And it's just a change in perspective. You have a story right there where you possibly didn't fare pretty well in the acads back in the days or during certain portion of your time, but then you've made a change. You've taken a very interesting job. You've solved a lot of challenges, and then you're able to demonstrate that despite whatever contrary to popular belief, I've been able to have an experience which has demonstrated this kind of value at my job or in a specific industry, or being able to move people. So all these are fantastic stories, like more like an underdog story, right? Where you say that you just flip things around, and this is my story and where I've come, and this is what will take me through ISB and post beyond. So don't look at anything negative as a negative, and I have to say why negative, but think of it as how I change things around, and that's a fantastic start to any story that you have.
Right, right. Cool. And there is one question from someone who has asked about the low GMAT score. So probably I can just kind of answer it, because I'm also seeing some trends over the last few years. So the question really is, what is the impact of a low GMAT score? My first advice to people is, don't get a low GMAT score, right? But in case you've taken it a couple of times, taken it 3 times, you're like, tired. First of all, don't worry too much about it. I think what happens a lot of times when people get a low GMAT, let me just define low GMAT. We have done some analysis, and what we have gotten is, in the last, I think about 10 years that we have collected data, the lowest GMAT score that anyone has been admitted to at ISB has been, I think, 580 or 590. And typically, these are diversity candidates. These are people who are not from India, right? So if you're going to be from India, and if you are, applying, my general rule of thumb is 650 is a score where you don't need to worry about being rejected, because one drastic shift that I've seen in ISB in the last 3 or 4 years has been they are not relying as much on GMAT scores. So as long as you get above a lower 600s, let's say you got a 670, that is not going to be a reason for you to get rejected, correct? But obviously, if you have done nothing else, you are from a very disadvantaged demographic profile, you have no great stories, and then you have a 670, correct? You are rejected for other reasons. See, what has happened is, I think this myth that has been propagated about low GMAT scores is, you know what? I got rejected because I got a 670 on the GMAT. No, you didn't get rejected because you got 670. You got rejected because you have nothing else to speak about in your profile, correct? And see, people never admit to saying that I interviewed poorly, correct? Nobody said that I went to the interview, they asked me basic questions, and I was tongue-tied, because it just sounds embarrassing for me to say that, right? So what I do, I just kind of give my reason as this nice thing. Oh, my GMAT score was so-and-so, but ISB has a cutoff. They don't consider people less than 720. So I think that's incorrect. 650 plus, you don't need to worry, correct? And if you are from IT, or if you are from some of the overrepresented profiles, maybe a 700 plus would be good. I've had students who have gotten at 620, but the person who got in at 620 was a female applicant from I think she was from the merchandising background, correct? So diversity in terms of job function, diversity in terms of gender, correct? So 700 plus if possible. 650 shouldn't be a reason for you to get directly dinged just because of your GMAT. All right. So the next one, leadership potential. So, I mean, what's your take on, everybody seems to have stories, correct?
Yeah.
But they are not very sure, what's leadership potential. How do they really gauge that?
Yeah, the classic mistake that people make here is kind of trying to fit themselves into somebody else's definition of what leadership is. And they're trying to take what they've been through. Okay, according to popular definitions, leadership means ABC, and they try to take their experience and tailor it to those moments or those definitions. Now, what this does is it waters down your experience, it waters down your identity, it waters down your story itself. First, each of you believe in a certain trait of leadership, that's what leadership means to you. You have to first stand strong to it, and therefore come across and say, how is that my story ties into for me to have continuously demonstrated this, right? And nobody can say I'm a great leader, right? Your leadership, nobody. I mean, you can't say that your story tells you that what trait of leadership have you been chasing time and again, have shown consistency in demonstrating it, and therefore, what is an outcome that it generated as compared to other folks in the same area that you've been working through. So it's very important. The idea is to not project that, oh, I have fantastic leadership capabilities or qualities. That's very subjective. But when you have a story as to why you've been consistently demonstrating a certain trait, and you've seen outcomes that otherwise usually people couldn't have or didn't, is basically how you'll sell a leadership potential. Now, why does ISB ask for this? See, think about this. Every job that comes post an ISB course are placing people in very strategic positions. Typically, you're handling a region, you're handling a category, you're handling a product, you're handling a business. Now, which means you're continuously bombarded with the different sets of people, different diverse sets of practices, processes. And the whole idea of going through an ISB program is one, you coexist with people, you contribute, you learn, and then you go ahead and spring into a very, very unique identity of yourself in the bigger world and a bigger scheme of things, pushing great initiatives. Now, if you've not had a taste of this in your past, then it kind of becomes very difficult to convince that, hey, I have not done anything, but from now on, I'm going to do these leadership traits in ISB and therefore get into a leadership role post ISB. The story doesn't kind of fit in well. So ISB wants to know, what is your perspective of leadership? What is your story surrounding the trait of your leadership? And therefore, you're giving them a vision how you could be fitting into a bigger picture, bringing back laurels for the ISB brand once you pass out. I think that's my take on it.
Right. I think what you said was true. In fact, the whole idea is, leadership is, what I usually tell students is, when you want to pick stories, just try to think if that is something that you are kind of expected to do. And if you're expected to do that, probably it is not really under the category of leadership, but something that you went over and above what was expected of you, because eventually from a leadership perspective. And then there is personal attributes, I think, more in terms of the personality, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The third part.
And thing is, of course, this is again. I mean, I would want to kind of piggyback on the point number two I was saying, right? Again, there is immediately a bucket list of attributes that you feel that okay, ISB would want to see that I have these attributes. So let me somehow kind of show that I have these attributes, and therefore ISB has a checklist that okay, he has attribute A, B, C. We'll give him admit. Right? Doesn't work that way. Personal attributes is truly about bringing out who you are, and I think even before you get down, to trying to identify what these are, first is, this is where your whole introspection, this is where identifying what all have I done, why have I done, what makes me do things every day, how am I different, why am I, in what scales am I in, how do I call it, in what scale am I very similar to the rest of the folks that I'm working with? Or when I ask my friends, what do they say different about me? There are so many perspectives. First, you should collect saying that this is all me, and then figure, okay, now that I'm applying to a B school and it's ISB and there's a whole bunch of folks, and I've already figured that I'm okay to handle the academic part. I have already demonstrated elements as to how I've brought in certain impact through initiatives that I've done through my job or in the past. But now I also want to tell them what kind of a person that I will come on board and add value to the class and add value to the industry post ISB. ISB is very, very interested in creating a brand value out of itself through you guys. So, which means if you're not able to throw in, okay, listen, if you don't have me, which means you're losing out an opportunity for owning me as the brand, as part of the brand. That's exactly how you want them to feel, right? And that
It's
can
11
come on
o'clock.
you in.
Sorry, that's just my laptop telling the
All
time.
right. Right. So, but just think through that, because now the first step before any of your ISBSs basically means how well do you know yourself, and do not fall under the classic trap of trying to fit into expected attributes based on what you've consumed about other people who already got into ISB or who are applying to ISB. It's very important. This part is very important because this is where you're truly having a conversation with anyone who's reading your profile, and it shows when it's being genuine about yourself and not fitting it.
Right. Cool. And I think with that out of the way, so the three things, we are going to obviously get into the questions shortly. But let's probably also just touch upon the way in which ISB really buckets people.
Mm,
So
mm.
you have the high achiever bucket, the diversity candidates, the really poor profiles, and then the demographically disadvantaged. So you could probably something about the selection process.
Yeah, because you see, ISB gets applications, of course, across the country and across the world, and it's always in the buzz. It's a great brand to be part of. Um, So when the classic case of dealing with an audience is to segment them, right? And that's what we call as buckets. So when profiles do come in, of course, the high achievers, the diversity candidates, and the poor profiles, you don't have to worry about the application process itself, because the high achievers and diversity guys would definitely get in. And of course, while diversity is kind of quoted way too much, it's just about how off track, how much of an path that you've taken is different from the majority of the rest. So I would kind of classify diversity as that. The poor profiles are anyway not going to make the cut, and of course there's a bunch of factors that kind of qualify what a poor profile is, but that means no stories, no low GMAT, no academic credentials. I mean, you're not shining up in any of the three things that we spoke of, and then expecting to get an admit doesn't happen. But I think I would assume that a majority kind of fit into the fourth segment, right, which is basically demographically disadvantaged. We call it we call it the biggest bucket because there is no difference between any applicant that falls into the bucket, right? Classic, classic IT experience, 4 to 5 years, projects that make sense only within the context of IT, but doesn't translate into a business context or into what kind of profiles or functions that you would be handling post ISB, limited context on the aspect of business. So it becomes very difficult to kind of sell your story when you fall under this segment, right? Because if you think, oh, I got a 710, and then that is going to keep me afloat the rest of the applicants, no, because in all probability the other person's also got a 710, the other person's also had the same IT experience, the other person has also had 4 or 5 years, kind of comparable grades in academic. Then what gives ISB the reason to kind of pick one or the other? And this is exactly where the challenge is the maximum, and ISB therefore has a job cut out into saying that, okay, who truly comes across as a person who's very who knows himself, who has had experiences even within this crowded segment, and how well that this person is seeing himself post ISB, and how will this person contribute to the class of ISB. All these questions kind of gets interweaved into your responses into the application essay itself. So if you belong to bucket 1, 2, or 3, I think you're quite sorted. I mean, you don't have too many things to go wrong on. You just basically get your stories right, and you're through. But bucket number 4, I mean, it's your work cut out, man.
Right. I think just one thing that I really, and this is a question that people have asked as well, what defines a diversity profile? And I think the mistake that people tend to do is they look at just the work part, and they tend to look at it and say, okay, what I do is different. So I've had people coming in and, just I think a couple of weeks ago, I met someone and he said, but Arun, though I'm working for Wipro, I have to tell you the project that I'm working on, and then he went on to say something about how exciting it was. And I said, dude, that's fine, but you're still in IT, right? Just because you did an exciting process doesn't make you a diversity candidate. I think so I think a couple of categories clearly stand out. I think we do have a lot of doctors, people from the armed forces. I think also international applicants, people who have passports from other countries. I think that probably comes over here. And people like sports persons. I think any diversity in your class?
Well, in my class, there was an actress. In my class, there was a person who flew the chopper for Abdul Kalam. There was a person who basically failed in multiple startups. For me, the best way to answer diversity is by yourself, right? Where if you feel what you did is found everywhere around you, then in all probability you don't fit into that bucket, right? But if what you have done so far is just so not heard before, or it's so exciting or so different or so unique, there's potential to it, and there's a reason why you went down that path, then you can kind of assume that you might just get a seat into the diversity bucket, right? But the diversity is not, as Arun was saying, right? Diversity is not in the kind of projects that you're working within your vertical. So, I'm working on this amazing AI-based coding project, which and I'm designing a certain functionality of it. Right, good story, but as I said, it still comes under the bigger bucket of the path many people have already taken or are in the process. So, I think I would just call it out that way.
Right. Right. So I think just wanted to also say demographically disadvantaged. So though we have mentioned about people from IT, but to be honest, it is not just IT. I would say a chartered accountant, right? Because what you have to understand is a lot of chartered accountants applying. So the chartered accountant is going to fight with other chartered accountants, right? So even if you be fighting with other startup guys, correct? An architect would be with other architects, a lawyer would be with other lawyers, correct? So I think probably law or architecture, what's your take? Because they are not very represented. So would they come under diversity or would it still be in the fourth bucket?
You're talking about the architects?
Architect or a lawyer? Let's take two examples. One is an
Perfect.
architect, one is a lawyer.
Sure. Okay, it's a classic numbers game. For example, imagine out of 1,000 applicants, let's say 800 people are lawyers. Then obviously they become the demographically disadvantaged people, right? Because now everyone's a lawyer. Then what differentiates one from the other? So yeah, I'm in agreement with you when it says when you say that. It's not just IT. It's basically if you belong to a pool of applicants who belong to the same vertical and same profile, and that is a larger in number, then the idea is how do I have a right balance of different verticals? Because look at from ISB perspective also, all of you are trying to get into B school where you're going to have experiences from each other. And if I put a large set of people who have done the same things, then the opportunity to learn from each other is that much lesser, right? So there is a healthy mix of verticals. There's a healthy mix of profiles and functions that ISB also need to ensure so that every person coming in has value to add. When I say value to add, bringing in that person, bringing in your job specific, your vertical specific or function specific experiences, and therefore learning from others who belong to other profiles and other functions and other experiences.
Right.
And so it's very important, therefore, if you know that, hey, a bulk of applicants are going to be like me, then you automatically fall into bucket number 4, which means, therefore, you need to cull out, you really go deep down and say, okay, is this story any different from everything that I've seen around? Then yes, I definitely can stand out even in a crowded bucket.
No, one more thing, I mean, is that I think, when you look at it, so this is for the people who come from, let's say, I'm just going to pick something, right? Let's say you are from marketing, right?
Yeah.
You're from sales, or you're an accountant, or you are a lawyer or a banker, right? So the thing is that you still are going to be competing because there is obviously going to be competition from others, because if you were to tell what you do for a living and people don't go, wow, is that a job like that? Really? If people don't say that, probably a job function is not, like you're I don't know, just making it up, okay? Like you said, right? Not making it up. But if you were to come and say, I was Abdul Kalam's, chopper driver, I'm going to like, wow, you're telling me really how, correct? So I think diversity is that, right? I mean, otherwise everybody could have something, like maybe there is some function that you did. So it's very hard, but I think use your judgment, correct?
Sure.
And yeah, I think pretty much we've kind of good insights and good points on this. I'll just go through some questions that I have in front of me, and I'm just going to go ahead and answer. We already had the question on low GMAT score. As I've said, above 600 for most people, above 650 for people who don't have a lot of other things to speak about. One question was, and I'll just kind of go through it so that we kind of get the questions out of the way. How important is the brand value of the university? It's a reputed college in the state, but it's not well known. See, if it is reputed in the state, people should be knowing about it, right? Like, I would find it very hard that you went to a college that is known in your state, but is not known in India, right? So pretty much ISB would look at those factors, but again, don't try to worry about things that you cannot change. There are 15 days to go, and there is plenty of things for you to worry about. And the last thing that you should do is worry about things that are not in your control. One more question that I had is, how important is the level of graduation, college, and getting, it's not being a top 100 engineering college? See, if you look at the earlier slide that we had, we said academic potential. So if you feel your undergrad is low, compensate for it with a GMAT score. Simple as that, right? If you're going to get low GMAT, poor undergrad, then there is a problem, correct? And then I have a bunch of questions around essays. Uh, and then I'm just looking at, yeah, so I think we pretty much have a bunch of other questions which we can take later. So, I mean, we can go on to the next. We can probably get on to the essays itself, right?
Sure, sure.
So we have 2 essays, and I think most of the students have started probably taking a crack at it. And let's take the basic elements of writing the essay. Uh, so I'll just kind of go through it, and maybe you can add to it. So when people ask about writing essays, so I just tell them that just remember that there are 3 components to writing well. The first is, who are you, right? So one thing you have to remember is you are the hero of your story. And a lot of times when you talk about your story, it's very easy for us to talk about everything that we have done. And as I said earlier, it is virtually impossible to condense your entire life, your 25 years of existence, in 700 words, correct? So what is required is, in your story, what is it that you want to focus on? I think the key word over here is focus. Think of it as a movie, right? Let's assume that you're watching, let's say, the Bourne series, right? So when you see the main character Jason Bourne, what they are showing is very simple, right? The story is he has lost his memory, and he's trying to find out the people who did this to him. That's it, correct? Now, they don't show him buying grocery, correct? They don't show him taking a shower. They don't show him, doing any other thing, watching TV, chilling, watching Netflix. They don't show him doing that because that's not relevant to the story, right? They
Right.
show only the parts where it has something to do with the plot. So I think a lot of times when you say your story, I know there is a lot that you probably have, but I think it's time for you to distill it into the specifics that will essentially be what you want to showcase to the B school. The relevance to an MBA and ISB is obviously, this is great, but why do you want us, right? So the example over here is, if you were to go and let's say you want to date someone, and you go up to a girl and say, hey, this is me, and you want to just talk about yourself, that's not a great strategy to kind of woo the other person, correct? You also want to say, like, why am I wanting to get married to you, or why do I want to date you, correct? Me being great is fine, but unless and until I'm able to translate and say why doing an MBA from ISB, why getting that PGP degree is important for me in my career path, if you're not able to translate that, you may be the eighth wonder of the world, but ISB may not want you. And the third thing is, the story is fine. What you want to do in your head is clear, but along with clarity comes the ability to articulate the thoughts. So again, if I were to take the same dating example, right? So you go up to that person, you're going to tell her or him, you want to make sure that you use the best choice of words so that he or she gets impressed, right? So it's very important that uh, make sure that from a language, from a structure perspective, you got things kind of this. So just keep that in mind. So just remember, whenever you're writing, keep these 3 parameters. Am I focusing on what I need to say as far as the story is concerned? Am I making it relevant to ISB? And third, am I saying it the right way? Correct. So I think if you keep these 3 things, should be on the straight and narrow. I mean, I just kind of expanded this a little further. So maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a classic framework to ensure that you're not missing out on something, right? And for me, the best part of this triangle, it's the first component, right? It's your story. Your ability to see your life as a story. First of all, many people fail here, right? You're not seeing a life as a story. You're seeing a life as a series of siloed experiences that don't talk to each other. Then what ends up happening is your essays becomes more like a resume where you feel every line is important I mean, it is important. Every line is your experience, and you felt great when each of them happened. And then you're still thinking, man, I've done some amazing things. I've told ISB I've done all these things. Why didn't I get through? Because they didn't talk to each other. They didn't present a version of you. They didn't present like a character sketch of you that, oh, all right, this is a person who, because of A, B, C traits, has continuously had these different experiences, which has made this person as who he or she is today. So the best way to crack on your story is first, of course, list down all the stories, all the experience you think has happened, whether important, not important. Remove your judgmental cap, remove your perception cap. Just being able to have all of these things together is the first step, right? And these are basically nothing but a set of experiences, right? Now you're basically picking on what did each experience teach me? What did each experience make me? Did it make me a better person? Did it make me a more efficient person? Was it a skill that I built up, or was it an impact or an outcome that I was able to get out of it because of that experience, etc., right? And third, because of these learnings I've got as a result of all these disparate experiences, now how have I used them time and again to therefore become better, right? And that's a classic part of your story. You have experiences, you have taken learnings from it, and you're being able to apply those learnings and therefore keep doing your job better, keep doing your functions better. Now, the best, another classic mistake that happens here is trying to bring in too many stories also, because at the end of the day, remember, somebody's reading it, nobody's talking to you yet, right? Somebody's reading it, and they're also human, right? And when they're reading through it, they want to build an imaginary web of, okay, this is who the person is, and this is what the person has gone through. This is how this is how much the person knows about himself or herself, and therefore I am excited about the story, and I would love to meet this person because he or she has gone through this. Now that's basically what you want the reader to have or leave behind when they're consuming your story. So kind of ensure that you have everything listed. Don't miss out. Don't make it a resume. Don't make it a set of things that don't talk to each other. And very important that like you know what the learning from those experiences are. Because if you can't articulate it, it's a story without a start or an end. It's a story because it just happened, right? Second part, of course, is the language and structure. Uh, Many people make the classic mistake of trying to say, okay, let me use some amazing words that they'll be blown away that I know these words. And it's just come across time and again, time and again. Nothing beats the crispness of language. Nothing beats the simplicity of the language. End of the way, it's a two-way transaction. They have asked you something, and now you have this one shot to say that this is who I am, this is what I've gone through, and this is the message I want you to get. Until and unless you're not clear what the person reading should be thinking about you, then you can't just throw like 10 stones in the water and expect one to hit your target. And that's where language and structure comes so much into play. And remember, if you do make the cut and if you're actually going for an interview, uh, I mean, folks on the other side of the table have seen thousands of profiles, thousands of applicants. And the moment they catch one discrepancy between the way you're talking and what is written in your essay, then you've already lost your credibility. And trust me, of all things, it's okay to even get a reject, but losing your credibility in front of panel it's a bad place to be in. So ensuring that the story kind of reflects the way you think, the way you write, but making sure it's crisp, simplified, and of course the final check, the grammar check, just to ensure after all these amazing stories, you don't want some simple grammatical mistakes, kind of. Say that, oh man, I don't know if this person would be able to survive if he or she can't like write proper grammatical sentences. Okay, you've gone through these two mountains, then the third triangle, therefore, kind of becomes the filter to your bucket number one, which is your story, right? Um, in terms of relevance to ISB, ISB is always about how much do you know yourself? How well do you know why you're doing whatever you're doing so far? And of course, these are classic questions, but what is amazing is 90 to 95% of the folks are still don't have a proper awareness of why they want to do an MBA now, why specifically ISB, and why specifically the yourself. And it is frankly it's important to take a step back and say that, all right, why am I doing an MBA? Whatever it is, write down your honest answers there. Is it, I mean, it could just be parental pressure. It could just be, oh, without my MBA, I can't possibly get into a wedlock. There could be so many reasons that are personal to you, but fair enough. Park it. Think about what would make sense to ISB from you adding value to the class. That's a classic filter. That's a very good filter to all the stories that you have. And therefore, build on it and say that, okay, this is the way I'll be able to contribute back to the class. And why ISB? You need to be clear. It's not, yes, ISB has a great brand, but they also want to know why is that you want to be so much a part of this, group of individuals who are going to come on class. And a good way to definitely think about is also, now that I've had these experiences and learnings, how can I come and better the experience there at ISB? And also, what are going to be my takeaways from the program and from the curriculum? And that means research. If you don't know what ISB is going to make you better in what ways, then just making the story up is just going to fall flat. And at the end of it comes like, okay, why specifically you? This is what the completion of the entire circle, right? As you can see, all of this talk to each other. And if you attack each one of them in disparate ways, you're basically going to have all the answers, but in a very fragmented way.
Right. So I think pretty much, that covers the background before we get into the actual essay question. Just 2 points I wanted to add over here. So, I mean, as you were saying, right, like people using tough words, I think somewhere people have this notion that in the business world, the way people speak is different from the way people speak in normal life, right? Maybe in the
Right.
upper echelons of power, people just speak like, oh, can we just symbiotically synergize this
Right.
stuff? People don't talk like that. People talk normally, right? And the whole
Right.
idea, the essay needs to also talk normally. I think sometimes you just have this fear of trying to sound what you think the admission committee wants to hear. And somewhere a sign of intelligence seems to be using difficult words. But in my book, the simpler you are, and the more effective you are in communication. That's one point I wanted to kind of add over here. And I think the second point kind of gets touched when we talk about the essays. Shall I get into the essays now?
Yeah, please.
So let's take the first essay. So the first essay is on, at ISB, we value diversity as it enhances both the in-class and out-of-class learning experience. Tell us how would you contribute to the same? And over here, I mean, by the way, I'm just giving you the keyboard control. You can just try to see if you can control the screen from your
Sure.
end.
Let me just try this.
Yeah. So you can just probably, but you want me to just go ahead and control it?
Actually, let me just try, but if
Right.
it's not moving forward for some
I
reason.
think it asks you for system preferences and. Okay, so is this? So I'm not sure if. Let me do this. Let me just go ahead and just because it's just a click, so I'll just click on that.
All right, sure.
So I think the main question is, what is ISB really looking for? Because I think before people start writing, I think it's important for them to understand what ISB is really looking for in this essay. So yeah, so I'm just going to go ahead and click and show the rest of the text, but I mean, you can kind of talk them through this.
All right, sure. So first is see, I've seen ISB's questions, I think, since the time I applied back in the days, right? Of course, the time I was applying to ISB, the first question was something like, hey, if there were three things that, if there are three things that differentiates you, or if there are, what are the elements that would differentiate you from the rest of the class? Or if you are the, then other version is, if you are the last, if there's one more person that we want to add to the batch, then why should it be you? You see, all, I mean, if you take this question, at ISB, we value diversity as it enhances both the class that's coming in and out of class learning experience. Tell us, how would you contribute to the same? Now, all of this follow the same pattern, kind of the same things. What ISB is trying to basically get to know is, how will you come and impact the experience of all the folks who are there in a class, right? And which means if you're sitting in a class, there is like 60 people in a certain class attending, and let's say attending a marketing strategy class. The learning doesn't come from acads. The learning doesn't come from what is being taught. The learning comes from what you're talking to each other, your perspectives that you bring to the table, the examples that you've seen so far, or the thoughts, the ideas, because this is what enriches the fellow people's perspectives, right? Now, if you have nothing to share, then you're just a seeker. You're not a giver. But if you have some things to share and you have things to take, which means that you are coming and adding value as well as taking value, it's a very good transaction, right? And also so this is in class. And ISB is known for such amazing initiatives that happens out of class. For example, there is something called the ISB Sports League, which was started in my batch, which has become a huge franchisee right now. There are like 4 teams. People bid for those teams, just like the IPL. They bid for teams, and the entire set of sports activities happens. Sponsors come on board. It's a massive it's a massive business franchisee that happens within ISB, and this happened just because a student thought of it, and it is now powering so many experiences year after year for all the batch folks, right? So obviously now it's not that ISB had this as an objective for you to do, but it was something that that's who you are, that's what you love to do, and you would come and therefore enhance the experiences of the folks in the current batch and the batches to come. So in this essay, the idea is to say that, all right, man, what can I bring to the class? What can I come and add from my experience? And you're drawing a vision. Once I'm in, I'm able to say that, this is the work I've done, or these are the travels that I've done, or these are the experiences that I've gathered. And this is going to be beneficial in A, B, C, D things as part of the ISB experience, right? And how is that, and why is that it's only me that can bring this perspective, or why is that it's only me that can bring this context and not too many people, not too many other people, right? That's one. And that's why Arun's also called out that this is an essay that needs deep introspection, which means if you don't know how you're going to add value, there is no way you can expect the other person to understand that what that value is going to be, right? And remember, you already filled in all your ACAD scores, your GMAT score, achievements, experience, etc. So there's no point of replication, right? The entire essay application is like a nice puzzle. You know that there are different moving parts, but just borrowing the same moving parts again and again and rehashing them is not completing the story. Your ACADS is telling your story that he or she can handle something. Your GMAT is a check mark, done. Past grades is done. Work achievements, you already called out, this is what I was able to achieve being a certain person. Now it is truly me putting myself out there and say that based on this journey that I have come to till today, this is what I'm going to enable the journey for myself and the rest of the folks. And that perspective is super important. And This is also going to help ISB, especially if you fall into bucket number 4 previously, right? Where you're seeing a whole bunch of people similar to yourself. And if, let's say, 10 people are going to come and say, okay, this is how we are going to add value and this is what we'll take away from it, just tell me, if everything is common and there is no real difference, then what will differentiate amongst the other 10 is basically how you've thought through this, how you've thought through value addition, and how you've thought through taking value from it. And therefore, this is as simple as it sounds. This is the make or break question, because this truly touches upon what has been your perspective of life based on all the experiences you've gone through.
Right. So I think pretty much what you said, I have a couple of points, but I think it gets covered a little later. So let's just probably get into the parts on where to pick the stories, because I think this is one question that people have. Where do I pick? So, and whether the stories make sense. So I'll just go through the first part and then so the idea is, just as Amin was saying, the idea is, I think to a large extent, showcase who you are, not what you do. I'm going to say this again. Don't tell them what you do. Tell them who you are, correct? The
That's
reason
a very cool one. Yeah, I love it.
I'm going to put a trademark like that.
Yeah, you should.
So, because what I say is, I hear a lot of people, I say, okay, so tell me, can you introduce yourself? And they just say, I've had, 3 years working over here. I've done this project. I did this, I did that. And, after a point, I said, okay, so this is what you do. But, I don't get to know who you are as a person. And I think B schools, one litmus test that you can use in your mind is reading the story. Does it make them feel they want to meet you? Correct?
Right.
And I think that's the essence, right? I should read the story and say, wow, seems interesting. Don't try to cram too many things into that, into the 400 words saying, I'm going to tell them everything. And really, the other mistake that people make when they pick the stories is every story, they want to be the hero. They want to be the guy who saved the world, right?
Right.
And, a lot of these, Rambo stories, I call them Rambo stories, right? Where you just went into a jungle with AK-47 and you killed all the bad guys. But I think it's kind of getting to show who you are. So let's say that I want to show that I am a person who has a lot of empathy, correct? Now, in today's business world, that's a very rare quality to have, because you're going to ISB doesn't want these 800-pound gorillas, right? These alpha males with 770 GMAT and, IITs and Goldman Sachs and Microsoft on their resumes. They are not going to fill the class with people like that. They also want people who make it a good mix. And let's say you want to showcase your quality of being empathetic towards others. You can pick a work-related story and talk about a time when, there was someone else who was not pulling in his weight and you had to show empathy and you had to go talk to that person, understand his problem. That could be a story. Now, the same empathy could be used in a personal story where, let's say in your family, you talk about the fact that you come from a joint family and the fact that everything that was yours was shared among, let's say, 10 different cousins. So these are all actual stories that I've had students write, right? That's why I'm giving that example. So again, that could be empathy over there. Or it could be something as simple as, during my spare time, I like to spend my time, doing a particular activity. And, let's say it's some kind of a social service. And, over there, it could be empathy. But the same empathy can be picked across a variety of different, areas. But the idea is not to focus on the situation, but the idea is to focus on the message. The situation is there just to corroborate the message. So if I were to go and say, hey, I'm empathetic, the second question you're going to have for me is, sure, but why? How do you say that, right? Can you give me an example? So remember that the story is an example. The story should not become the main thing in your essay for question number 1, right? And my take is pick 2 to 3 stories. The next slide, we are going to be giving you some formats. But pick at least 2 stories and pick 2 adjectives. Let me make it simple. Pick 2 adjectives, right? And you should be able to tell when you say you're diverse, Why does this story? So being empathetic could be a diversity factor, correct? So it is not necessary that your diversity has to come only from your job function. It is, who you are. That's what the focus is, right? So I mean, you want to talk about the filters, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, as I said, picking stories are great, and it's also a fun process, right? And end of the day, if the stories are about you and you believe that, oh, these stories have had the maximum impact in my life, which means it should therefore impact anyone who's reading it as well. This is where we kind of get distracted, right? It's great. There could be stories that impacted you the most. There could be stories that didn't impact you at all, but this is all your perception of impact. So first idea is to ensure that you have these stories listed in a very neutral context, and the only truth to that is it's happened to you. But now that you're applying for ISB, you want to get a seat, you want to get a call for an interview. There are some very simple filters that you can see if it makes the cut. Of course, you should definitely also bank on external opinion on what impact these stories could have. But when you're doing this by yourself, the first thing is, how relevant is this? When I say relevant, ISB is trying to bring in a class of managers who have a good cool head, who have a variety of experiences, who can take on better leadership jobs, who can attract brands to be consuming them. So these are all ISB's things, right? Now, how does your story fit into being relevant of what ISB is trying to take in to project in front of the world, both in terms of brands that come to hire or in terms of saying that I am the school that produced a candidate like this who went on to do greater things, right? So somewhere your relevancy is, okay, will ISB get excited because I had this story, and it's a B school, and it highly values what experiences that you bring, and it highly values that in terms of enabling people do bigger things. So if you can't see the relevance of how your experiences are going to help you be a better professional in the business world, then in all probability, ISB won't see it too. So think how relevant it is to the industry. Think how relevant it is to the class that you're going to be part of, and how relevant it is for ISB to take ownership that, yes, you are the person that I would love to have because you are going to enhance the experience of the class. The second very good simple filter is the recency part. I mean, what is the problem with this? Sometimes I see stories that when I see content that goes way back in school days or in the first year of college, when you've had like 3-4 years of experience working in the industry, right? And it's insane that you had to go back so far to pick a story that defines you. And it's okay to borrow, it's okay to go back and then quickly come back to reality. And when I say recency, it's any time in the last year or two, which you use as a base as what an outcome was. And you can do a little piggyback on saying that, all right, the source of the story was there and the learning kind of came here, and this is how I applied, and this is what it has taught me, or this is what it has made me, and this is what has helped me go do better things going forward. So it's very important to not run way back in history to kind of sell who you are as an individual. It's important to keep it as recent as possible, the better, so that they know. Otherwise, it gives idea that you've not done much to impact yourself or the outcomes either at your work or in your life in the recent years. And of course, if you clear the relevancy and the recency part, you had something, Arun?
Sorry. No, I just thought I'll just add to it here. This is a classic case where something could qualify in the relevancy test, right? So when people come and say, Arun, I did this 4 years ago, and I think this was a great achievement, and I just want to tell them that, look, it was a great achievement, but remember that through that story, I know who you were 4 years ago.
Right.
But I want to know who you are today. Right? So I think the recency test, you have to look at it this way and saying, don't expect me to assume that you were someone that great 4 years ago, but, you would have grown, right? For all that, you might have not grown, correct? So I think that's the one other factor.
Sure, absolutely. And
Good, go ahead. I just
it's very relevant, and the fact that passed the relevancy test. So the third part is, of course, the uniqueness part too. And see, it's kind of a little difficult for you to evaluate your content for the uniqueness test, because fundamentally all of us believe that we are unique, right? I believe I'm unique, you believe you're unique. In our own world, we are the most unique individuals, and we would like to believe that, right? The best way to kind of crack on the uniqueness test is basically get your best friends or people who don't know you. These are two sets of people, right? And they are the best suited to say that, dude, this thing about me, how unique it is. Because then you're truly looking at a third lens to say if this story is unique enough. Because otherwise, everything you write will look unique to you. And that's, again, a classic fix that you can get. Because who's going to judge the uniqueness of it is not you, but somebody else. So for you to simulate the somebody else finding this unique, you have to find somebody else to see, all right, man, is this trait of mine? Is this a normal thing, or is it something that unique that qualifies for a good enough story that I've written? But otherwise, definitely, if you're doing anything, and if you are just burning the oil by doing things by yourself, make sure that you run every story that you've written about yourself through these three filters. And if it clears the filters, park it on the right. And once you have a list of stories that have cleared all these filters, that's when you realize, how do I stitch all of these together to deliver the final message?
Right. So I think one other thing, is on the uniqueness test, what I usually tell sometimes, when students say what you said, right? Very true, because I don't know whether I'm unique. So the question that I, usually ask them is, don't pick something that you think is unique to you. So I could say that, in my life, I've never done such a project, or I've never done something great, unique to you. But is it unique for that industry? Let's take an example of, and this is one common story that usually happens. If you are working on a software project, you probably had a time when the project did not go as per the plan, and things were kind of going awry. You kind of stepped up, you took charge, and you wrote code all night, and you were able to deliver it to the client, correct? Now, that's a classic story. It may have been unique to you, like you might have not done it earlier, but assume that most people who are going to come from, let's say, a software industry will have perhaps those kind of stories. So, that's the idea to look at, right? So, cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, but what will be bigger mistake is just writing the story and then not kind of putting it to the test. And I think it's very important that you think through that part. Yeah.
Right. I think, yeah, this comes after you start writing the stories and you pick the stories, right?
Yeah.
So just given like a 2-story and a 3-story format, in case people are writing a two-story format. So I'm just going to kind of walk them through this, and then, we can probably discuss on that. So if you have picked 2 stories, so here is my take, 400 words. I wouldn't really pick a 3-story format. I would probably stick to a 2-story format, given that, I want to just showcase one thing. So what I'm going to do is, spend 50 words, introducing myself, 50 words closing it, because very important that the essay is very tight. It looks like a story. It doesn't look like a bullet point. I've had students come and ask me, Arun, can I write bullet points, right? So yeah, sure, you can write bullet points, but this is an essay, right? They are expecting you to write a story. And a story cannot be told through a PowerPoint presentation. It cannot be told through bullet points, right? So if I'm going to tell you who I am, right, I have to tell you, when I was growing up, this happened to me, and I want you to empathize with me. I want you to resonate with the story, and you have to kind of use the right words. So I think it's important to have a start and an end. If you have three stories, as you see, you probably have just one sentence, because if you have started writing, you realize 20 words is probably one sentence, correct? So you
Yeah.
have one sentence starting, one sentence closing. But if you have a two-story format, you probably have a couple of sentences to start and maybe a couple of sentences to end. Again, remember, this is a framework. I'm not suggesting that all of you kind of try to fit it into this framework, but more use it as a thumb rule to gauge how your stories are going to look like. So
And I think just one point to that, Arun. And this is also, I mean, imagine picking a book and it just doesn't start with a situation, or it doesn't have an ending, or there is no flow towards. I mean, how well would you like this book? No matter how much it's acclaimed or how famous the book is, if you don't find the flow to consume content, and human beings are wired that way, they need a nice start, just like a magician show, right? A magic trick. It reaches a start, needs a suspense, and needs. I'm quoting Prestige here, but the formats you mentioned kind of talks to that, right? You are making the reader comfortable to ensure that they are consuming who you are in a nice way, that they can remember that this is who you are in terms of traits and characteristics. So to that point, it's definitely a great start if you don't have a structure in mind.
Right. Good point. Um, and I think with specifically the 2 points, the 2 stories, I think one is to talk about what is the diversity trait. Again, think of it as a trait. Uh, think of it as a personal attribute, a personal quality that you possess, which you think is unique. And let me just define this word unique. Unique is not something that only you can do in the world, correct? That is not called unique. That's called a freak, right? Like, I'm the only guy. I got the longest fingernails in the world. That's not what ISB is really looking at, right? So when I say unique trait, it's something that defines you, something that tells, okay, all the people that I know this is one quality that I can attribute to this person, right? Once you say what that quality is, tell me why is that a quality. Again, pick a story from work, from your personal life, from any other extracurricular stuff that you do. And so I'll give an example. So one of my students had written about his interest in photography. Now, he said, I know that every DSLR wielding guy on a vacation, family vacation, thinks that he's a photographer, but he said, it's a craft. And he does this thing, which is wildlife photography. And he says, sometimes I wake up at 3:30 a.m. and it's like a hour and a half, 2 hour drive. So that 5 o'clock, just before dawn, he's at this place and he's waiting for this, exact scene to come. And he says, sometimes I'm just, sitting there for like 2 hours, waiting for the right, image to capture, right? And he says, really what it's taught me is it's taught me to be patient. It's taught me to be kind of humble. It's taught me to kind of understand, that first I have to take in the situation before I react, right? Now, that was his main point. And then he spoke about how even at business, even at work, he says, I'm not the guy who will gonna jump and react to situations. I'm usually the voice of reason. So people look up to me and say, okay, so what do you think about it? And I usually say, and I just kind of, process it. And so I reflect, I don't react. That's one statement that he had made. And he said, that's what is diverse about me. And then he went on to talk about how he would contribute in the study group by being, the guy who would bring in this perspective about how he would do class participation. So a bunch of things. But the idea over here is, when you say unique, when you say diverse, it's just one quality that people usually attribute to you. So that's the 2 points that you want to write. So talk about at least 2 points. Because it's a 400-word essay, I would say writing 1 point would be maybe a little too less and may require you to elaborate too much. One thing that you ought to be careful over here is, like I said earlier, the Jason Bourne thing. don't go on this overload, right? So I've had people who write things like, oh, by the way, I want to just tell you that I'm sincere, I'm hardworking, I'm dedicated, I'm meticulous, I'm perseverant, I'm this, I'm that. They tell me 10 things and I don't remember anything about them, correct? So it's very important that you pick one quality, and don't worry that ISB is going to say, oh, these people, this guy just has two qualities. That's not what they're thinking. But, they want to talk about the two most unique or diverse qualities that you have. And the three-story format, well, you guessed it right, is the same thing, but instead of two, you now have 3 points you want to talk about, in which case you have very little time to develop the story. And each paragraph, remember, story, what is the quality and how will you contribute, right? So what is it that you have to say? Why do you have that thing? And how will you contribute to ISP? Just remember these three things for the two paragraphs. Anything on this?
No, I think this is very important that you kind of take this structure, because when I say structure of, I'm talking about the story, quality, contribution piece, right? Because you're getting in 3 points, you're also breeding in some kind of familiarity in terms of what to look out for in the next paragraph. Because once I see a certain structure, I would expect to see a new quality or a new point being treated in the same way. And it just makes, again, consumption easier and retention easier. So if, let's say, point one, you do it that way, point two, you're suddenly throwing in a random story format, completely different format in between. You're now trying to figure, okay, what am I consuming right now? Putting a sense of doubt. The time of spent in possibly a reviewer reading through your content, you should always assume it's limited. It's not unlimited. And in that point, you should always focus on whatever makes the reading pleasurable, consumable, and quick, right? And therefore, this when you evaluate your content the way you've written, the idea behind the structure of, let's say, story quality contribution basically talks to that.
Right. So I think pretty much with that, let's kind of look at the usual traps to avoid. So the three traps over here, you can go through it. We have like.
Yeah. So, kind of mistakes that people typically do is, okay, man, I've not written essays and all that stuff, but I have prepared my resume for my last job change. So let me just pick that up. Let me take these sentences which I've carefully thought from a job perspective, add an extra line, and that becomes the essay. Uh, First of all, lines from your resumes are not filled with action; they're filled with just facts, which means this talks to Arun's earlier point, right? You end up talking about no, what you do rather than who you are. It's a fantastic litmus test to see if content is going through that filter or that filter, right? Uh, Not being clear about what you will take away from this entire, you're putting in a lot of time, you're writing down stuff about you, you're applying to a B school, and you're investing money, but at the end of this, if you're not being clear about what is that you want to take away, then it means that you're not giving them a chance for them to say, yeah, there is a good chance you will have these takeaways. You're basically preempting as to keeping them guessing, oh, what will this person come and do on campus as by going through this curriculum. Paint a picture. It's important to paint a picture of what you're planning to take away, and that itself says how well researched and how articulate you are. And third point, a lot of people fall under this trap. While since there are so many dimensions sitting, right? Like on one side, you're telling me that it should be unique. On the other side, you're saying relevant. It should be connected. It should talk to each other. They should be diverse. And if all of these are coming together in an effort to attend to all of them, you end up not having a clear focus on what the central idea of it should be. So simple, keep it, when I say keep it simple, goes back to you're the hero of the story, and end of the day, when you're the hero, I want to know what this hero can do. And at that point, it always brings back focus on, this is what I want the reader to retain. This is the experience I want to showcase as an example of what needs to be retained, and boom. So this focus part, just for you to be able to answer this better, at the end of the whole content, if you're able to condense it to a single line and say, this is the line that I have basically been able to craft it into a story that becomes the essay, then I think you're sorted. So,
Right.
but keep this to ensure that you avoid these people.
Cool. I think pretty much these are the main things you should keep with you while you're writing. So I mean, let's go to the next one just to kind of keep a gentle look at the time. I think it's about 12 o'clock. We have another half an hour to go.
Correct.
So and once we go through this essay, I think we can go ahead and answer the Q&A.
Sure.
So yeah. So the second one is enrolling in a business school is an important career decision. Critically look at your career till date, the choices you have made, the key influences behind those choices, your goals for the future, and how you think ISB's PGP can help you achieving your goals. Again, what is ISB looking for? What's your thoughts on this?
Sure. Think about it. You are, and irrespective of whatever your motive is to do, B school program and go through the curriculum and learn some of these pieces. ISB basically also want to know how much you understand what you have done so far till date. What can you take away from that experience, augment it or pivot from it using the curriculum that you're going through ISB, and how do those two come together to basically go after a job or go after a function or go after a work experience post that. It's basically ISB is just trying to figure, are you clear on why you want to do this, and what what is your eventual career plan post ISB as a result of the studies you'll go through in ISB over and above what you've worked on so far. Because if, as I told you, even sometimes when I ask, all right, assume that you got the admit into ISB, assume that you finished the course. What is that you want to do? I mean, once you pass out, what excites you? What interests you? What are the problems or challenges you wish to solve? They're like, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure I'll get some good job, or I'll land up in some good leadership role, or I'll just figure out as it happens. These are all nice things to say but feel, but it doesn't impress. It doesn't impress B school, who, end of the day, wants to ensure that you have the right experiences even after you pass out. So if you're not coming in with clarity of what is that you eventually want to get into, tell me, how can the school help you find the clarity? Awesome. So it's very difficult to find out. I mean, it's very difficult for the school to help you out then, and it therefore doesn't become a mutually beneficial relationship. So ISB clearly wants one thing. All right, man, have you done your research? Do you know your strengths? Do you understand that why you want to go through this? And as a result, do you understand what is that you will get access to as opportunities, and what is that eventually you want to do in life? And how does ISB come in between and make sure that it can help you with this plan as long as you have a plan? So if it's, in fact, it has gone ahead and clearly told, like earlier, at least ISB used to ask this question as, just tell us, kind of run us through your whole profile of what has been your career like, and short-term, long-term aspects come into it. But in this case, what are they asking? Critically look at your career till date. What are the choices you have made? The key influences behind those choices. So I'm calling out these three pieces, right? Your career till date, the choices you have made, the influences behind these choices, your goals, and therefore, once I understand you're very clear about all this, or you understand, or you introspected on all these aspects, I as ISB want to know, how do I fit into your plan of getting wherever you want to get to? So this is not a simple, okay, let me just write, these are my goals and these are my, I was first a software engineer, then I became a senior software engineer. Oh, I made a choice between Java and Java stack and Ruby on Rails stack. No, it's not to the aspect of the tech context of it. It's more towards, where are you steering your life towards? If it's about you want to build a business out of consumer, if you want to build a business out of internet consumer driven businesses, then these are the choices I've made, so that at some point in time I'll be able to be in a place to handle big product launches or handle solutions that generate jobs. Or it could be, you could be passionate about bringing education to the masses, whatever that is. But as long as you have something that you're chasing, then it shows that you're passionate about something. And ISB also feels nice that, all right, I can help, achieve this dream. But in an aspect to, don't go something that, don't end up putting on content that you just putting out there because you feel you can impress them just by the content, but you have nothing to do with it. If you manage to make the cut by using such content, you will get shot down in the interview. I'm not kidding about this. Whatever you put here, there is a reason they have said critically. It means they want you to have a hard thought about this and ensure that you're absolutely clear this is the path. Of course, things might change once you go into ISB, once you get new perspectives, which is fine. But as of today, have you put in the effort to figure this stuff out?
Right. And I think, if you look at the way in which we suggest what they should be picking for in stories. So the first thing that, as Amin said, the idea is to kind of look for whether you, so if you say something as generic, and I'm just going to add to a couple of points that he said, which is, I want to be a consultant, right? I mean, you have no idea what a consultant does. It just sounds cool. So saying that you want to be a consultant or you want to be a product manager, sometimes over here, it's also important to understand what is possible, what is not possible. I've had people, right, post MBA from ISB, 3 to 5 years down the line, I see myself as a CXO in a Fortune 500 company, right? But the point is that's never going to happen. I mean, it may happen, okay? So, could happen, right? Hypothetically. But they're going to look at it and say, well, the chances of him becoming a, CXO at a Fortune 500 company is not going to happen. Let me do this. Let me reject this candidate. You know why? Because ISB doesn't want to disappoint you, correct? It says, this guy is going to come with all these unrealistic expectations of what an MBA is going to do to him. And I mean, I think, we have discussed this earlier, but I think a lot of times people think of an MBA as like this conveyor belt, and there is a black box. You don't know what happens inside. But on one side, you put a bozo, and on the other side, you have this Armani-suited management jargon spewing consultant, right?
Right.
To a large extent, you put a bozo on one end, you're going to get a bozo on the other end with a student loan, correct? So, I think it's important for people to understand that you cannot wipe away what you have done. So I think it's very important for them to kind of bring that to the table, saying these are the transferable skills that I bring. And this is how realistically and, the PGP from ISB is going to help me, get there. So I think, if you can't touch upon why you want to do what you want to do, and just having a clarity of the plan, right? What you need to accomplish in order to get there. So let me give another example. Let us say I'm in Bangalore. I don't know if you're aware of Bangalore, but let's just assume that there are two localities over here. So let's say there is a place called Hebbal and there is a place called Whitefield, correct? And I can take any other city that you're living in, right? Delhi, take Karol Bagh and CP. Bombay, take Malad and Andheri, right? Take any two areas and ask yourself, look, this is where I am. I'm in Hebbal. I want to go to Whitefield, correct? So in my career, this is where I stand and that's where I want to go, right? Now you have to look at it and say, there are a variety of different ways to get there. I could take an Uber. I could, drive myself. I could take a lift. I could, walk. I could run. I could jog. I could do a bunch of things. But I've picked this specific way to get there, right? So in this case, it is of all the ways to reach my career goal, I have picked one way, which is doing an MBA, correct? So you need to explain that with clarity. I think that's pretty much the key to writing this essay, which by the way is also there in the structure. So very tight essay, 300 words, correct? By the way, anything on these points, I mean? Sorry, I just
Uh,
kind of.
no. You covered it all, and I just want to harp again on the realistic part of the first three factors that you showed, right? I think realistic is definitely super important, and a lot of people lose out here by just having very high expectations as an outcome, and that kind of destroys the flow of the essay itself. So it's a make or break thing. So ensure that when you say that you have these expectations that you will run through these kind of jobs or you will hit these kind of profiles post ISB, think about what you've done so far and what is the good leap that you will be able to get using ISB's experience is kind of critical for this essay speech. But otherwise, the rest are kind of cool.
Right. No, I think, in terms of structuring the story, 300 words can be very limiting. In fact, one of the things that we spoke about earlier was this whole thing about clarity and concision. So you really don't have a lot of elbow room. So one fear that a lot of students have is, but I want to tell them a lot. How do I do that in 300 words? If you have a disadvantage with 300 words and you think it's unfair on you, just take solace in the fact that everyone applying to ISB this year has 300 words, correct? So it's
Yep.
not that you are kind of at a disadvantage saying, oh, I have 300 words, but this guy, he's got 700 words. No, everybody's got 300 words, right? So let's just look at what I would say. Start off by telling what has been your life story. Again, it is not repetition of data that is already found elsewhere in your application form, right? It's more about the growth. Like when I started, I was this naive young kid who thought, world was like this. But in the last 4 years, I've grown, I've understood the importance of teamwork. I've, just tell them how you have grown, in your career, in a sense of the macro level, not the micro level. So don't say, first 2 years I did this, this was my job function. After that, I moved to so and so company, and here is what my job function was. No, that's not what I'm saying, right? It's more like, the overall growth that you have faced. And then your second paragraph should say something to the effect, okay, now that I've done all of this, what is it that I want to do now, right? So when I started my career, I didn't know that, I thought I would be happy coding, but now I realize that I am more of a problem solver, hence I want to get into consulting. Or when I started my career, I was into, finance, but I realized that I want to get into private equity, and I realized there are more than one ways to look at a business, which my background in commerce did not prepare me for. Hence, I want an MBA to have a more holistic view of the business. So whatever you want to do, and why you want to do, because I also want to understand why, what motivates you to kind of do that. What do you understand about this role? What are the challenges that you think you'll face in this role? So I think that becomes your second paragraph, correct? So first paragraph, where you are, where you want to go. And then the third paragraph should kind of dovetail saying, look, if these are the three requirements for me to get to my post MBA goal, how would ISB specifically help me? Correct? So, you just probably want to talk about the knowledge you'll get, the fact that you'll be able to hone your leadership skills, you'll be able to get a different perspective to things, the fact that you'll have a great network, or the fact that ISB is a great brand in India. So all of these will then make sense, because now that you have told them what you want to do, you now need to tell why do you want an ISB in order to get there, correct? So that's what I would structure the 300 words for this essay as. I mean?
Yeah, and the third point as to how ISB will help you get there is the most critical part, right?
Right.
Because end of the day, they're trying to figure one part is okay, how articulate and how much time you put into figuring out where you want to be. But then the third point is literally the bridge, it's the glue. And that basically comes from how much you've also done research on ISB and what is its profile in delivering value to the previous batches and what kind of jobs has it got, what kind of industry experiences it has driven. All of this basically comes into perspective. So the stronger you get into the bridge between A and B, it's basically where all the scoring is going to go towards.
Right. And I think I'm just trying to see if I can get control of the screen. You just kind of, if you can
Okay,
just
one
see.
second. How do I do that?
So I'll anyways go ahead. I'm able to go to the next screen. It's just that I'm not able to take control over the top level panel. So
Okay, got it. What
yeah.
I'll do is I'll just maybe step out and step back in, if that makes sense.
Um, okay. So maybe, yeah. So I'll just kind of continue. Oh, sure. Okay.
Cool. One second.
So just kind of come, going back to the same point, which is don't write stuff that is already there in your CV, already stuff that I can find in your resume in the first paragraph, right? It's very important. So in fact, what I would suggest is first, if you have not done so, please fill out the application form. You will realize how detailed it is, correct? And you will realize that, with the kind of data that you're going to be, putting in over there, you are already going to cover all the points. So please remember, the essay is valuable real estate, correct? Think of it as a plot of land that you paid a lot of money for, correct? You have 600 square feet or, 500 square feet. You need to make sure that each and every square foot is justified. Each and every word on your essay should be justified. You should actually put it under that lens. If you're saying, I want to do an MBA in order to, in order is not required. So you just say, I want an MBA too, right? So even getting to that level of details, it's very important that you kind of look at it and say, what is it that you're doing, and how is it that it's going to kind of help you in your overall application strategy, right? So that's the first point. And the second point is with regards to the way in which, yeah, I think, so sorry, the way in which people talk about goals. Again, we have covered this earlier, but you're going to keep it generic. They're going to think you have no idea. You probably are doing an MBA for the top two reasons why most Indians apply for a B school. Okay, and I'm going to tell you the real two reasons. Number one, I want more money. My current job doesn't pay me as well, and I'm just looking at an MBA as a ticket to getting a higher paying job. Number two, my current job sucks. I really do a lot of donkey work. My boss is like, he's a sadist, and I just hate working here. And hence, I'm just looking at something better. I have no idea what it is, but I sure as hell hope that it's better than what I'm doing right now. Now, if you end up in either of these two categories, you're probably going to write whatever comes to your mind in the goals essay. B schools are very varied. They want to weed out people who are applying with no specific reason. And the third point is specifically about ISB, saying the generic stuff, right? The obvious stuff, saying things like ISB has world-class infrastructure. And I've seen that in so many essays, right? They seem to, and I mean, you're able to hear me right now?
Yeah.
So, the funny part, and both of us have gone through essays, is, when we read this part where it almost seems that the candidate is telling ISB what ISB already knows, right? I have had people telling ISB in the third essay, I'm very impressed by the fact that you have two campuses, right?
Right.
Like ISB knows that, they know they have two campuses, but why does it matter to you, right?
Right. Right.
So any points on that?
No, and the good part is you showing them that I know things about you, but I think the critical part is, okay, how does that therefore come and fit in as to why or why it's not just being impressed, right? There's a reason why I'm interested in that aspect about ISB, and that reasoning basically needs to come out, and that's basically gives the perspective of ISB looking at, okay, I get it why possibly you'll be able to get more value out of this aspect of ISB. So the reasoning is very important whenever you pick about some aspect of ISB. Mostly this will fit into essay number one, where you're talking about, what are you going to be also contributing back to ISB. And also in essay number two, where you're saying that ISB is going to as a bridge between your pre-career and post-career. And if you're kind of not having the reasoning as to how ISB fits in there, then you might end up making these mistakes as well. Just writing out the obvious thing and not pulling out the reasoning piece.
Right. So I think pretty much we have kind of come to an end. I think we got another good 15, 20 minutes. I think we can invest that in perhaps taking some of the questions that students have had over here, right?
Sure, sure.
So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to probably pick and choose the questions that I think would be relevant. For example, some of them are asked about, recommendation questions. I think, we'll just probably stick to the scope and, ask about just, the interview questions, right? So one quick question, is this recording going to be available? Yes. So after this gets done, we should be looking at, uploading it. So yes, this would be available, right? So one question that I have from Deval Gupta is how personally takeaways would help in a wider audience. It is, sorry, it should be said aloud, or is it pretty much to be understood? The personal takeaways.
So personal when you say personal takeaways, it's about what is that you're going to, what is that ISB is going to offer you, right? Here's the deal. The idea is obviously not to sound too simplistic about these takeaways. For example, if I say my takeaway from ISB is that I'm going to get world-class business education and I'm going to be the best manager, and I'm going to get a great job in a brand. You see, there is no character to this. However, if let's say my whole passion is about building products and I want to therefore eventually be a product manager, coming up with these amazing products, and therefore my whole goal is on reaching a certain product management role with a certain brand. However, in between that, you're first talking about what stops you or what inhibits you from getting there, right? What are the missing elements? And when you have identified the missing elements, you're now able to call out that this aspects of ISB, maybe this courses or this influx of professors or this setting of clubs that basically bring out industry experiences is going to help me bridge that gap. Now that is a lot more warm and that connects both sides and basically talks about takeaways in the context of why you need these takeaways. So there is nothing like, okay, me calling it out loud or should it be a little behind, but it just should be part of the link between why you need these takeaways in the first place and where is those takeaways going to take you.
So I think, one more point over here, just to answer that, is also the takeaways could also be drastically different. So
Sure.
what happens is in India, we live in a very, the term over there is, high context, right? So contextually, we tend to understand, but it may happen that the same scenario, there may have been two different takeaways. So the ISB AdCom is really looking at personally, what is it that you have taken away? Correct. So I think that's also a key to mentioning, saying that there could be other things, but this is what I took away from the whole incident, right?
True. I'm with you.
And one more question on the career goal story. A lot of people talk about going into consulting, and this field is a majority in terms of placement as well. Hence, it's invariably competitive. If someone who doesn't have a consulting background, but the roles have been tied to problem solving / in-house consulting, will it spook the AdCom if I write I want to get into consulting just because of the fact that it's super competitive? So this is a question from Siddharth Bobna.
Okay. I think this is the classic is, first of all, do you want to be a consultant, right? The question is that first. Forget ISB, forget the AdCom, forget the essays. What are the aspects of consulting that excites you as a person? Now, if you're going to base your future career choice based on what kind of roles become available in a majority, then somewhere you're giving away control of your career choices in your life to someone else based on a trend, right? Very bad way to look at it, right? The way to kind of deal with this is irrespective of whether consulting is the most jobs or marketing is most jobs, or there is less of certain profile that you're looking at, it should be again about you, that there is a reason I am chasing a certain type of job. And if being a consultant is that, then that's what it is. But if you pick that as a reason for what you've mentioned, obviously they're going to look right through it, and they will, the fact that they also get that many consulting jobs, then they also understand what is the desire of an individual or a candidate to go for that role. So you'll fall flat there. Even if your story comes out, you won't be able to substantiate why you want to be doing that in the interview process, right? So be very clear not to fall under the trap of trying to say what you want to do based on the kind of jobs that you feel are coming to a particular B school, in this case ISB.
Yeah, I think the point also is with regards to the competitiveness of what you're saying. I think it's okay to say consulting if you, as Mameen said, right? Like you just look at it from your perspective. Are you able to weave a story? If you are able to weave a story, don't worry if everyone else around you is writing that. Correct. So I don't think I would change consulting to something else just because I think everybody is writing consulting. So let me write something else, and I want to be a scuba diver, right? So post MBA, people do consulting. People don't do scuba diving. So it is not. It's not going to work in your favor if you end up saying something which, as a post MBA. So uniqueness is your story. Uniqueness, don't bring it into the post MBA career path, right?
Right, right.
So I got like plenty of questions to just give a number. We have answered just about 14. I mean, we have about 42 open questions. So what I'll do is I'll just sift through the questions and just try to quickly answer because many of these are very specific to each of the candidates. So it would be virtually impossible to answer specific questions. But let me just answer like a couple, and then I'll throw a few at Amin for him to answer. Niharika, we do a profile evaluation. So after this webinar, if whatever you've heard is interesting, if it sounds like, you might get some answers, why don't you just reach out to whoever you're talking at Crackverbal, and we would love to do a profile eval specifically for ISB and probably help you with that. Deval had a question on the recommendation question. If person doesn't have a LinkedIn profile, no problem. See, it is about you. It is not about your recommender, correct? So I don't think you need to worry about your recommender's LinkedIn profile. There is one more question, which is with regards to the part on, is there a job gap for 6 months? If you have a job gap, make sure you are able to explain the job gap, right? What they are looking at is, was this a guy who could take a punch on his chin and still get up, right? Was this a guy who shows resilience? Because see, you could have gotten a pink slip. Maybe you got fired. Maybe the company went down. Maybe you thought you'll start your own venture and you failed. A person who is, who has said, I tried, is 10 times better than a person who said, what if, correct? Because a person tried, actually went to the arena, he actually fought the battle and he lost, right? So I think, we should not shy away from failures. We should not shy away from talking about things that happen to us, because it just makes you a more well-rounded person in the eyes of, the admission committee. You know what, scratch that. Not just the admission committee, anyone, right? Like if you show your vulnerability, it makes you a person, correct? Otherwise, you're just a bunch of achievements and certificates. And it's perfectly okay to talk about things like that. Do I need to attend an info session to make a strong case? Shubham Katuria is asking. The answer is no, right? So they are looking at who you are. They are not looking at whether you attended a session. So I don't think there is a way for them to even track that, correct? All right, so I had a question. Let me just go through two more questions, and then I will throw one question at Amin. Nitin, does it need to be exactly 400 words? Exactly 400 words, okay? So the software that they have, it basically will cut it out. So even if you write something, if it's more than 400 words, it basically gets cut out, all right? Okay, so I mean, a question I have had from a couple of people, which is the re-applicant essay. So in case you're a re-applicant, there is a separate 200 words that you have in terms of explaining. So any points on that? We got a couple of
Sure.
people asking about it.
Sure. And reapplicants, definitely it means there's a reason they ask you, they give you some additional space. And that is not the space for you to tell them a new story from what has happened prior to your previous application, right? That's a space for you to tell them what has changed or what have you been doing since the last time you have not made it to ISB, right? This is basically for them to know, have you had any new incremental experiences? Have you gotten onto any new profiles? Has your story gotten any different from what you've told us last time? So don't think of it as a space, oh, last time I possibly forgot to tell them about something that happened. So maybe I'll bring that in and say, maybe this should excite you guys about me. No, this is all the delta time between your last application, this application. They want to know what has changed. They want to know how have you spent this time in possibly going still ahead. Remember, they already have data about what you've written about your previous job and your future career choices, right? So if you've deviated from it, then that could come in as a credibility issue, right? That you've said something and done something. But as long as you have an incremental addition that this is how I enhanced my profile, this is how I enhanced my skills, this is how I enhanced my time spent on things, then that basically becomes the content that you should articulate in this particular question.
I think that's a good point. I think, one way to kind of put it is, let's say, again, I'm trying to give a more millennial example, right? If you go and let's say you were to propose to a girl or a boy, and let us say they rejected you. They said, no, I'm not interested. And you have a stab at going back to them again, right? And you want to go and propose to them again. Are you going to say the same things? Probably not, right? Because you got rejected saying the same things, right? So you want to look at it and say, what is it that I can say differently in the essays, and specifically as a reapplicant, what is it that has changed in my life in the last 1 year? I think that's the way to kind of crack it. So I think, cool. I'm just going to look at some of the questions that could probably be, because see, a lot of times what happens is many of the questions that you have asked is stuff which could be very specific, but I'm just trying to pick something that could be related to the essays. Okay, so I got one. While placements in ISB, this is not really related to the essay, but could kind of matter. Will the recruiter consider the previous package before ISB?
See, first of all, everyone who comes up with roles, I've seen shifts, massive shifts, I've seen average shifts, I've seen no shifts. When I say no shifts, I've seen marginal shifts. And this depends on what kind of packages that you've got before, right? Now, any kind of remuneration that you're getting for a job or a role is a function of the role you're going to perform, which means that if you're convinced a recruiter that you are the right person for that job, then you basically get paid what the job is worth. They're not now going to say, oh, you're earning only this much, so we are going to give you only this much. This has not come up, at least in my exposure to the folks who have kind of gotten their jobs and stuff. And considering that it's a switch from pre-profile to post-ISB profile, it makes sense for a switch that happens right now in your industry. Tomorrow you apply for a job, they ask you what's your previous CTC, and based on that, what hike do you want, etc. But when you go to an ISB, it's a different scene altogether. It's all suited for the job and how much you are able to convince and make sense that you are the best person to be doing that particular job.
Right. One more question. This is in fact, if you have an underdog story, so I'll do one thing probably. Since it's already 12:30, maybe I can just go through some of the open questions very quickly and then probably close it out, right?
Sure.
So I'm just going to go through at a very fast pace, okay? So
yeah. Rapid fire round, man. Let's do this.
More of a rapid fire. Anu Dixit asked if I've got an underdog story, where in the application should I include it? You probably would include it in the first essay. Talk about why you were the underdog and how eventually you got the better of it, right? Pratyusha asked me about the YLP program. You asked something that is Googleable. So my suggestion to you is go ahead and Google what are the requirements, and you should be able to find it on the ISB YLP website. Is it necessary for our first essay to demonstrate leadership potential? When you say necessary, sure. If not leadership, what else are you going to demonstrate? Think of it as 400 words that you have to speak about yourself. So if you feel I don't want to talk about my leadership, great, but tell me something else that is equally interesting, right? Um, Siddharth Bubna had this, how common according to you is international experience for people who, see, international experience is always taken as a positive, correct? Not just the fact that you went there, but if you are able to show some cultural exposure of having lived there, great. It just shows that you're more sensitive. It just shows that you're more adaptable. It just shows that you bring a lot more stories to the classroom. Shivani asked this question, which is, she's a software engineer with 5+ years experience, but I'm putting my essays around a 2-year stint in the theater. Great. So you have two stories. One story can be the theater story. The other story can be any other story. How does ISB deal with candidates having 10+ years experience? The only thing they're going to look at is this person having more realistic reasons of doing an MBA? So they're just going to kind of try to drill a little deeper into that, right? But apart from that, 10+, 2+, pretty much you're going to be evaluated along the same parameters. Ankit said, I co-founded a company, failed, worked on it, had a family business. Great. I think these are all great stories. If you are able to tell the B school that there is a business aspect to it, that you have kind of understood what it takes to run a business, I think it's always going to be a positive. Rasika Durge had this question about her doing, working for an NGO, and, she's currently working as a group program leader. Yes, Rasika, female candidate, turned into social sector, did the Gandhi Fellowship. I don't know what it is, but sounds philanthropic enough, right? Whatever you're saying makes you a very strong diversity candidate, right? So definitely. Then there is a question from Jennifer, which says, what is demographically disadvantaged? I think we have already answered that. There is a person who is from the early entry applicant who is asking me a specific question that probably, see, we are not the ISB admission committee, right? This is not an ISB info session. So
Right.
I'm going to say, any specific details about ISB, please ask ISB. We probably are not qualified to do that. I'm just looking at questions that, does doing a graduation from open university, if you're a CA, matter? No problem. 50% of CAs don't go to college, and it's a known fact, so don't worry. Okay, so here is a nice, interesting question. So someone works in the mechanical piping industry, and he says, look, my industry is not a great industry, right? I mean, it doesn't have great career prospects. What do I really tell the admission committee as why I want to do an MBA? Because my industry currently is not like a great, exciting industry to be in. What would I tell the B school?
So you want me to talk to Darren?
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is a good question, mainly from most folks thinking that coming from a certain industry or certain vertical only matters. Let's remove that misconception hat. It doesn't work that way. I've seen classic example, batch of 17. I've seen a guy who's literally been on the shop floor of a mechanical department, getting in and eventually becoming a product manager and area sales manager roles at his discretion at the end of ISB. So it's all not to concentrate on what you are doing right there as part of this. It's about you still had people that you're working with, you still had objectives to chase, you still had challenges that you had to cross, and that's where you will be concentrating on and not on the actual tech aspects of the industry itself. So stories can come from anywhere and it can come from there too.
I think the other thing that happens usually is people get overwhelmed when they hear about stories written by others about this guy who saved like, $10 million and, saved the world, found a cure for cancer, and prevented the Third World War from happening. So how do you really, what would be your advice in terms of impact? Because I think a lot of people are also scared by that fact, right? Like people are writing these stories.
Now, this is very similar to when you see a rash on your skin, you try to immediately go figure out what possible diseases that you could have by online searching, right? And most of the times, what you find out is different from what the doctor says. And that's the same truth here as well. You can't chase, what you felt by reading maybe other sample essays written by other people, because it's all specific to them. You might think it's grand, somebody else might think it's not. So then if this is the confusion that exists, then the only way that you can cut through this is being genuine, just calling out what is that it taught you and what is the person that you have become. The aspect of people, the aspect of experience, the aspect of challenge always sells and always brings in the story that you think is the best story that I can say. And don't keep thinking that, oh, I have to match up or I have to ensure that it at least talks of a certain level of grand voice as I've seen in other things. No, your story means it's your story. Don't try to inflate it or deflate it. As long as you have these elements together, it's the best you can come out with. And that's all they need to hear.
And I think last question that we can take for the day, again, very relevant. When you talk about the why ISB, everybody seems to be talking about ELP, talks about, the clubs over there. I want to be in a consulting club. I want to do this, do that. How do you really stand out in that particular paragraph?
You don't need to stand out, right? Don't try too hard to say that, okay, well, if everyone's saying this, I shouldn't be saying this. Or nobody has said it, therefore, if I say it, I will get a better. No, that's not the point. ISB wants to know that, okay, you know what are the things ISB offers. For example, if you are a dancer, and you're like, oh, ISB has a dance club. I'm a dancer, so it's going to be awesome. See, it doesn't even sound exciting, right? But if you're a dancer and ISB has a dance club and you thought of some new initiatives that you can come and enhance the experience of students, then that's the story part of it. You're lightly hinting that you understand what all ISB offers, but you're also talking about what is your role going to be, and the fact that you've thought through it is what makes you stand out. So the fact that you just know doesn't make sense. You build a bridge, bring in your perspective of how you're going to contribute. It's always a story that sticks, and
Right.
you should be able to crack on it.
Right. I think that's pretty much what I would have said as well. So great. I think we went through a bunch of questions. I think a lot of you still had a few questions we might have not been able to answer, but please reach out to us. I think you have the details of the person that you've been talking to at Crackfable. So, if you can just go ahead and reach out to us. In case you have not done so already, we do have an ISB interview predictor tool. You can reach out to the person that you're talking to. So what we will typically do is look at it, try to understand from a perspective of profile, perspective of your GMAT scores, what we think are your chances of getting into ISB, or at least getting an interview call from the ISB, right? And if you have your essays written and you want someone to have a review of that essay, we also have something which is like a last minute 1 week turnaround time, a couple of days we will take in doing this process. So do reach out to the people that you're talking to at Crackfable, be it Monica, Sachi, Swati, Vijay, Like, Shubham, whoever you're talking to after this call, please reach out to them and please check with them on how we can help you with your application for ISB this year. Thanks a lot. Amin, I think it was very interesting, having you and your perspectives. I think pretty sure all the students loved that. So thanks a lot for your time. I know you're joining us from Singapore, so might be lunchtime for you.
Yes, Arun. It's about 3 o'clock here, but it's always fun chatting up with you on the other side of the table. And thank you all, guys, for bringing in your questions and ensuring you guys are all learning from each other. ISB is an awesome school. I'll always be a fantastic brand ambassador for the school. So give it your best shot and make sure that you live to say the ISB story. That's my kind of closing point. Yes.
Thanks a lot, and thanks everyone else. And as I said, please reach out, and this recording will be available. So you can always go back and watch what we had to say. Thank you, and have a great rest of the weekend.
Cheers. Bye-bye.